number of years now, the city has been calling for greater powers to be afforded to Metro Police. Also, last week, I read that the Joburg Metro is also keen on not wresting some power away, but also being given investigative powers for its Metro Police force. But the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Police, in its end-of-term legacy report, said there were plans to expand criminal investigative powers for Metro Police, and they'll do this by amending the Saps Act. It's a development that has been welcomed by this particular city. Mayor Geordin Hill-Lewis, really appreciate your time. What investigative powers would you like the Metro Police Department to have? Good morning.
Good morning to you, Lester. Good morning to everyone. Yes, we do welcome that announcement by the Portfolio Committee, because we have been for a long time now in correspondence with the Justice Minister and the Police Minister about exactly this issue, about expanding the definition of criminal investigation. There's a definition of criminal investigation in the Act that we would like to specifically include municipal law enforcement, which includes Metro Police as well. At the moment, we don't really have an investigative function. We of course we can pursue suspects if we're in pursuit of a suspect, we can pursue that. If we see something on a CCTV camera that looks like a crime, we can go and deal with it. But we don't do criminal investigation beyond that very basic conception of investigation. But we would really like to be able to do full investigations so that we can follow up cases and prepare. Crucially, this is actually the reason behind it. We crucially prepare dockets for prosecution, because so often this happens every single day, and there's countless examples. We apprehend criminals, hand them over to SAPS, and we apprehend that same criminal 2 or 3 weeks later back on the streets. Their case has been dismissed from court, chucked out of court for whatever reason. And that's what we'd like to get right.
So essentially all Metro Police departments can do now is to arrest suspects and hand over evidence to the South African Police Service, and the South African Police Service must make and do with what you provide them. Correct,
exactly right. They've got to prepare the whole docket and investigate the case and then hand it over to the NPA for prosecution. Now, based on SAPS's own annual report, they declare in their own numbers that they have a detection rate of 12%, only 12% for 2023. That is horribly, horribly low. And we're never really going to turn the tide on crime in South Africa when that's the case. So the upping that detection rate is a crucial part of turning the tide.
What is the potential for overlaps with the South African police services?
We don't think that there's anything wrong with those overlaps. There are so many cases. I mean, the average detective in Cape Town has more than 200 cases on his desk. It's not actually reasonable to expect any human being to be able to do a proper job for that many cases. So we're saying that there's, you could have a case management meeting with the SAPS once a week, divvy up important cases, and help one another to really try and get through more of those cases in a systematic and professional way. And I think that would help quite tremendously in this metro to increase that detection rate.
The reason why I mentioned the Joburg Metro, also now saying that it would also like investigative powers, is that it appears that the rest of the country follows the Western Cape and the city of Cape Town. 5 or 4 years ago, the LEAP officers were introduced to the city of Cape Town as part of a Western Cape initiative, lambasted by the ANC. And then not too long ago, you have Panyaza Lesufi, the Premier of Gauteng, introducing anti-crime wardens, which to me follows the exact same template of a LEAP officer here in the city of Cape Town. The city has been calling for greater investigative powers, and now the Joburg Metro says, well, actually, we would also like investigative powers. It seems as if what the Western Cape does, the rest of the country follows, but only if it sounds like it's their idea, Geordin.
That's exactly right. But I mean, I don't mind that. It's just about getting to what works. So, I've long believed that when we call for the devolution of powers, it's not only for Cape Town. I believe that cities should be running the train system in South Africa, and I don't just mean Cape Town. Joburg should be running their own train system. I believe that you've got to have stronger metro police in South African cities, not just in Cape Town. So if other cities get on board and help us to lobby for that position and advocate for that position, then strength to their arm.
Is this a step towards devolution, the adjustment of policy that powers are devolved, but not necessarily billed as the devolution of policing powers to metro polices?
Yes, I think so. I see. My argument has always been some things have to be. There can't be a middle ground. So, for example, trains must either be run by PRASA or they must be run by the city. There's no way to do a hybrid. You've just got to get it done. But in other places, there can be hybrids. And I think policing is definitely one of them where you can do a stepway devolution where we help to up that detection rate and we take on some of that detection load for Saps and get those numbers up and see where that goes. With greater powers, I think we could really be of much greater assistance to Saps. And as you know, I think we've discussed this previously, at a station level, our officers work tremendously well with Saps. I always get notes and letters from station commanders saying how grateful they are. It's actually only really at a leadership level where there's any kind of opposition to this idea.
What would be the interplay between a municipal or metro investigative detective service in providing dockets for the National Prosecuting Authority for it to be case ready? Would there need to be some amendment in the procedure and legislation which allows for a city investigator to go to the National Prosecuting Authority saying, the guy that's currently in detention, this is a case-ready docket for you? Does there need to be some amendment of that legislation in the interplay between a policing service and the National Prosecuting Authority?
Yeah, that's a good point because the minister has often said publicly in response to my letters and in the media that this requires a constitutional amendment, and that's just absolutely not true. It requires a very simple, literally a 5-minute amendment to the Saps Act nationally. It's just literally a definition change of who can do criminal investigation. At the moment, if we prepare evidence, all of that evidence must be handed over to Saps. They must put it together and then get it over to the NPA. And very, very often between that cup and lip, something falls, and we have criminals getting back out onto the street. Also, the NPA or the detective branch doesn't necessarily take as seriously some cases that we believe should be taken very seriously. One example is the scourge of cable theft, which destroys our infrastructure. That is still prosecuted as a petty theft case because maybe the value of the copper is 200 or 300 rand. But the devastation that 300 rand of copper does to our infrastructure is massive. So these kind of things where we could prosecute those crimes better and investigate them better, I think would make a big difference.
Because we already have had a criminal laws amendment act, I think that was in 2016, which gives stiffer penalties for the stealing of cable which is linked to key infrastructure. So it may just be a cut piece of rail cable, which someone who steals it but thinks we're going to get a couple of 100 bob for this, but in fact it impacts and has a domino effect on way down the line when it comes to key infrastructure. So if you police that a little bit better, people will be disincentivized and discouraged from actually stealing that particular small section of cable. But I appreciate your time, Mayor Geordin Hill-Lewis, City of Cape Town.